guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here, and today is Vlogmas Day 11. Today I'm going to be talking about some underhyped books. I did an overhyped books video I think in July, so I'll link that video in the cards and down below, so go and check those out, because yeah, I think there are a lot of overhyped books. But I also think I've got 10 books on this list which are books that I really have enjoyed, and I think they're underhyped and that not enough people talk about them. So let's get started. So the first two that I want to talk about, I do have the sequel here. I don't actually own any of these books because, I mean, I don't keep books, you know that. And yeah, so I have the sequel to show you, but as kind of like a stand-in for those. I haven't read the sequels yet. But most of the books, like I said, I don't actually have any copy of at all. So the first one I'm actually wanting to talk about is the, I think it's the series is called Gone by Michael Grant, and the first book is actually called Gone, and that's the one I want to talk about. I do have the sequel, which is Hunger. Look at these amazing orange pages. But anyway, Hunger is the second book, I believe, yeah, in the series, and I really enjoy this, the first book, so like I said, I haven't read this one yet, but I am excited to do that. Michael Grant is an amazing writer, and he wrote this series, which is a dystopian series, which in the first one, all the adults disappear, basically. They suddenly disappear out of nowhere. Sometimes there are cars that they were driving that have crashed because they're no longer in them. And yeah, so basically all the adults disappear, and suddenly the children realise that on their 15th birthday they're going to disappear as well. And the two oldest boys are about to turn 15. They're a bit scared, they don't know what's going to happen, and it basically follows, it's kind of like a political thing in children, basically. They're trying to decide who is in charge and who's going to tell everybody else what to do, and it's really interesting. I love it. I think it's really well written. Gone was amazing, and like I said, I'm excited to read the rest of the series. So the second series I want to talk about is the Mediator series by Meg Cabot. Now this series is one that I've really enjoyed reading the first book of recently, and hopefully I will get to the rest. In fact, I own all 6 of them. The one I have here is number 5, again, just as a kind of placehold, so you know what I'm talking about. But Meg Cabot is the author of The Princess Diaries, which is a book that gets a lot of hype and a lot of recognition, but for some reason this series doesn't. It follows a young girl named Suze, who is what they call a mediator, which basically means that she can see ghosts, and she tries to help them figure out how to cross the boundary, I guess, between like purgatory and where they're going in the afterlife. And lots of fun things happen to her. The first book I really enjoyed, like I said, and I've read these all when I was younger. I can't really remember them other than the first book, but yeah, so this is, like I said, the 5th book, because I don't have the first book anymore. But yeah, really liked this series when I was younger, and I'm enjoying rereading it now. The third one is one that has been talked about a little bit on BookTube, but I feel like it gets its kind of moments of people talking about it, and then nobody talks about it then for ages, and that is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. Now this was one of my favourite books that I read last year. I really enjoyed it. It basically follows a filmmaker's daughter who allegedly commits suicide, and they find her body in the bottom of an elevator shaft. But there's a journalist who's been following this filmmaker's life, and dodgy things have happened. He makes films basically which are very dark and kind of gruesome, and actually a lot of them are on the black market because they've been banned. And so he's followed his life for a long time and thinks that something's going on there. And then when he finds out that this girl has committed suicide, he then tries to figure out what's going on and does like an undercover type thing. And there's different parts in the book. There is like news articles, and then there is like just general text and things like that. And I really enjoyed this. I thought it had a really good like sense of atmosphere to it, which was great. And I really enjoyed that. I do, however, think that a lot of people have sort of, because it's such a big book, I think people get put off, but I honestly think it was worth it, and I'm really glad that I read it. Next up is an author who is also a comedian, and she's one of my favourite comedians. I absolutely love her, and that is A Tiny Bit Marvellous by Dawn French. Dawn French is absolutely fantastic. I love her. I think she's incredible. She's such a beautiful soul, and I've read, I think all 3, she's got 3 books out. I liked one of them, didn't like one of them, and thought one of them was okay. So I've, you know, had kind of a mixture, but the one I really liked was A Tiny Bit Marvellous, which follows a family that's really interesting. It follows a woman named Mo, who's 50 something, and she's kind of going through quite a difficult time. She has a 14, I want to say, year old daughter called Dora. Yeah, who is very into her technology and her phone and being cool and all those things. She's a bit difficult. They also have a son who's very eccentric, thinks he's Oscar Wilde, and yeah, is kind of dealing with things of himself. The father, her husband, is kind of not really either the here or there. He's kind of a bit of everything. And Mo decides to do something that will potentially change everything, and it's about that, and really it's mainly about the dynamic of this family, and I just loved it. I thought it was really well written. I love Dawn French's humour anyway, so I really liked that. And yeah, this book was just one of those books that nobody talks about. I've never heard anyone talk about it, but I definitely think it's one you should read. I think some people get put off it because it's like a celebrity writer, if that makes sense, but I think it's worth it nonetheless. It's absolutely phenomenal, and I really think that you should go and check it out if you haven't already. Next up is one of my favourite sort of dystopian post-apocalyptic books, which actually deals with the sort of end of the world happening, and it actually sort of goes through it happening, as opposed to a lot of them I find where the kind of end of the world as we know it happens and then you get to see the world afterwards. And this one is called Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeffer, and this again is not one I've heard many people talking about, and I feel like it's very underhyped, but I love it. It basically follows I can't remember the name of the main character because I read this a long time ago, but it follows a girl who basically lives with her mum and dad and her two brothers, I believe. One older, one younger, I think it is. And at the time when this book starts, everybody's very excited because they're going to watch a meteor go past the Earth, and they've all got kind of this, you know, excitement to watching this big event, like we do with the eclipse and things like that. And then, unfortunately, the meteor hits the moon, and it then becomes a case of there are tidal waves, and lots of things are affected obviously by the moon and the tides, and so the weather changes and it's very like snowy all of a sudden, and things just start to go massively downhill. And I love this. Again, this is the type of book I love to read. I really enjoy that kind of like end of the world type thing and how people deal with it, and kind of the personal stories and things, and I love that. So yeah, I really liked this one. 100% glad that I read it, and definitely would recommend you all to read it if you like that kind of dystopian type of story, because again, it doesn't get much praise. Then I've noticed the last 5 are all kind of thriller stories, because that's, as you all know, is my favourite thrillers, and I think a lot of these stories do get some praise, but I don't think they get as much as they should. So the first one I have of those 5 is that Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson, and this is a story that has got some hype because it came out as a film, but I don't think the book got as much praise as the film did, in terms of like not as many people talked about the book, I think, on BookTube specifically. This follows a woman who has amnesia, and she wakes up every day and forgets the day before and her life before. She has some vague memories of an earlier life when she was a child, but a lot of her memories have gone, and she wakes up every day living with a man who says he's her husband. She doesn't know him, she can't remember him, and she has to kind of relearn her life every single day. And then at some point she kind of leaves notes for herself for the next day, and she starts to realise that perhaps not everything is as it seems, and possibly the man she thinks that a man that's calling himself her husband has some kind of secret. And like I said, this is really interesting. I love this. The twists in it were amazing. I just thought it was really very thrilling, and the mystery was there, and the whole amnesia thing. I don't often enjoy the unreliable narrator, but I actually really enjoyed this one, and I thought it was really well done. Next up I have The Confession by John Grisham. Now this is another, I don't hear a lot of people talking about John Grisham in general, and maybe it's just because I don't watch the right channels, but I often find that John Grisham is overlooked, and I think he's amazing. I've read like 3 or 4 of his books, and I plan on reading more. But The Confession was one of my favourites, and again, it's not one I've heard anyone talk about. It follows a man who has abducted and raped and then murdered a young girl, and then he watched as her high school boyfriend gets arrested for it, and he gets put in prison. and he's on death row. And then however many years later, he's 4 days away from death, the death penalty happening and him actually being killed. And this man suddenly decides that he wants to confess to the crime and say that it was him and it wasn't this guy who's been arrested and charged and, like I said, sentenced to death. And I thought this was amazing. Now, there is one thing in this that I do find interesting, and it doesn't come across necessarily from me just saying that, is that the guy who murdered the girl is a white man, and the boy who was arrested is a black boy. And so there is also some talk in this about kind of racism and like the prejudice that this boy faced in order, like, for him to have been the first suspect generally. Yeah, it is an amazing story. Again, not many people talk about this, and I really wish more people did read John Grisham's books because I love them. I'm 100% a big fan of John Grisham, but please let me know if you've read any other and ones I need to read. I think I've read, is it called, I don't know. I've read a few of his books, but let me know which one's your favourite if you have read any John Grisham, because I always want to know which ones to continue with first. Next up, I have another one that I got, actually, I think might have got free on my Kindle, but again, I've never heard anyone talk about, maybe because it is a free Kindle book, everyone assumes that it won't be great, but it was The Forgotten Girls by Alexa Steele, and this follows a female detective who's trying to find out what happened. Basically, there's a town which is very privileged, very like well-to-do, everybody's a bit posh and they've got these like well manicured lawns and everything's like perfect and nothing goes wrong, and suddenly young girls start dying there. And they're all found to have been taking Adderall, which I believe in America is kind of a it's something that's often used by people going through exams and things to keep them awake. It's like an upper, I guess. And obviously nobody in the town thinks that it should be happening where they are, and they have a lot of problems with that. So yeah, this is a story about that. I thought it sounded really good before I read it, and then I read it and I wasn't disappointed. I think this is the first in another detective story, so again, there are more books in the series that I can get to when I get around to it, but I'm very excited to do that because this book was really well written. It really got into the detective's mind and you really sort of read a lot about it, which was interesting. And yeah, I just really liked it, so definitely one to check out if you haven't already. Then next up I have another one which was a free book, I think, again on Kindle, and this one is The One You Love by Paul Pilkington, which again is not an author that I'd heard about. I've never heard anybody talking about him, and I've never heard anybody talking about this book, which again is another one that's the first book in a detective series. I forget what the detective is called, I won't lie. But this one follows a woman who, on the night of her hen party, I think, so she's having a hen party and her fiance is having a bachelor party. I think that's what they call it in America. They've got a stag do in England. I can't remember if this is an American book or not, to be honest. Anyway, something happens, and on the night of that event, she goes home to find that her fiance is missing, and her fiance's brother, well, she finds her fiance's brother's dead body, battered and bloodied, I think in the bathtub. I can't remember if it's in the bathtub or it's just on the floor, but anyway, it's in their apartment. And suddenly, like I said, her fiance's gone missing, and suddenly there's secrets, and she's being followed, and her every move is being watched, and again, amazing. The twist in this I didn't see coming. I really enjoyed the story, and I thought it was one of those books that, for a book that's free on Kindle, the last two I've just talked about are absolutely amazing, and for free books, like, I can't get over how incredible they were. And then the last one is a book that I have talked about on this channel before, and it's The Abortionist's Daughter by Elizabeth Hyde, which again is a very good story that I've not heard anyone talk about. It follows a woman who works as an abortionist, or an abortion doctor, who is found dead in her, she has like a pool in her back garden, and she's found dead in it, and she has had arguments with both her husband and her daughter in the run-up to that time, to when it happened, and also not on top of that, she obviously is being targeted by people that are anti-abortion, and so it's kind of a political thing. There's a detective in it. It's very good. Again, I didn't actually see the twist coming, which I was expecting I was thinking I would, because I was thinking all the way through, this is really obvious, like I know who did it, and obviously I didn't know who did it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I definitely would give it a read if you haven't already. So those are my top 10 underhyped books. Let me know what yours are in the comments below. I'm always interested to hear books that nobody else is really talking about. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel already. And if you're enjoying Vlogmas so far, make sure you press the notification bell to be notified every time I upload. And I will see you tomorrow at 5 PM. Bye guys!
We wish